Well, hello folks. Excuse me, and welcome to the first installment of an idea I had to do a video series on mathematics. My name's Adam Fry, and I've spent 4 years as an adult educator in the state of Ohio. Needless to say, when helping adult students and people who dropped out of high school for whatever reason obtain GEDs, I found myself in a position of mostly teaching mathematics because basic mathematics is perhaps the most stigmatized subject as far as basic education goes, and I feel that I found a niche in teaching mathematics to folks because I've had good response with my take on how this all works, and I think it comes from the fact that I had a very bad experience learning mathematics myself at the high school level. I was not a great high school math student. The subject never came natural to me, and by default and through, I guess, just fate would have it that I would collide with mathematics as an adult after I got a job where the main job duty ended up being teaching basic mathematics. So needless to say, the best way to learn something is actually to teach it. So as I learned it for myself out of some instructional books and began to teach it, I seem to have grasped a pretty firm understanding of basic mathematics. So my goal is to create a short instructional video series that encompasses what I consider the 3 basic levels of mathematics. Now you'll have to bear with me, I'm on a doodle time pad of my daughter's here, but I thought it would be a pretty fitting way to really try to break down basic math and show you folks how simple this stuff really is. So without further ado, I'm going to jump into this and begin talking, giving you a little spiel on my take on math. I first want to kind of lay down some ground rules though. It seems that my experience with mathematics through high school and even in college and as an adult, one of the reasons I think math has become so stigmatized, basic math has become stigmatized as being such a difficult subject, and I'm sure you've all heard it and may be telling yourselves you're bad at math, and that's just such a crutch that a lot of people use, and I used for years, was I told myself I was bad at math. And I think a lot of that has to do with these folks I'm going to call math snobs. And I'm going to kind of define math snobs on the fly here. I'm sure you know a math snob or two. Math snobs are the folks who you encounter in life who try to make math sound more complicated than what it is, be it through the use of confusing terminology or just the purposeful shrouding of math in this incredibly intelligent realm that they almost get an ego trip out of others not understanding it and themselves understanding it in a way that no one else can. So I don't want to be too vague about that, but the term math snob, I'll just say, is reserved for those folks who get an ego trip, or I hate to use this expression, but kind of get off on letting people think they're incredibly intelligent because they use a fancy terminology for a lot of these mathematical concepts, and when in reality you'll see that if you just use some good common sense and not let the terminology get the best of you, which brings me to my next rule. I'm going to kind of number this 1. We need to ignore all math snobs and take away their credibility in the world. They've ruined it for me for a long time, and I'm sure they've ruined it for you. So I would like you to, first of all, know that I am not a math snob, and I'm going to approach this in a way that it makes sense to me, and I'm sure you math snobs who watch this video may not agree. I may not use exact correct terminology on some of this stuff, but my goal is to just set forth a video series that will help people obtain GEDs, be able to pass some basic standardized tests that encompasses various branches of basic math, which I'll get into in a minute. Number 2, I think I always write this on the board whenever I've taught classes on this basic math. I always wrote concept is greater than terminology. N-O-L-O-G-Y. Pardon my spelling, and I had to hyphenate that because I ran out of room nearing the apples and balloons on the right margin. Concept greater than terminology. What do I mean by that? Well, I mean that the way I have always taught math and the way that it fits, in the most useful sense in my mind, is that we should always be more concerned about understanding the concept of an issue in math over top of the terminology. Meaning, I would much rather you know how to do something than to know what it's called, the technical correct terminology that goes along with a lot of this math. You'll see that in geometry and even when we're dealing with fractions and things in arithmetic, there are so many words that scare people. I'm sure you've all numerator, denominator, congruent lines, perpendicular, all this stuff, which, don't get me wrong, it's important to be exposed to that terminology in a large sense, but if you're going to dedicate your brain power more so to one of these than the other, it is more important to understand the concept over the terminology. So I always write those couple things on the board as being kind of important. So like I said, without further ado, I'm going to break this down for you rather quick and do some erasing with a paper towel. And these videos will be broken up into about 10-minute video segments. So I'm at about the 6.5 minute mark now. So I'm going to just very briefly, very quickly tell you how mathematics, basic math, I need to write basic here because we're going to just really encompass these three areas. We're going to talk about arithmetic, algebra, and geometry. As I work the bugs out in my video series here, I'm already finding out that my board is rather small, so I'm going to have to do a lot of erasing. Basic mathematics, I break this down into these three basic areas: arithmetic, algebra, and geometry, where I'll just define these in my own words. In the way I see this all fitting together is geometry. I'll start with geometry. Geometry, which actually the prefix geo is I think like earth related, and metry kind of derives from measurement, and we won't get into the the etymology of all this stuff, but geometry is really where math kind of comes to I kind of call it the pinnacle of mathematics, because this is about the world. I mean, this is about measuring things in the earth, objects, structure, things like that. And I'm going to kind of save this for the last thing that we'll go over, but it's just about points in space and how lines are formed, which form angles, and of course we'll spiral out into who knows where when we start talking about geometry. But geometry is probably the most useful form, of this basic mathematics. But it all relies on your ability, and we're working backwards here, in order to be competent at knowing geometric concepts and being able to apply these things. You really need to have a basic understanding of algebra. Basic algebra. And we will get into algebra. I kind of define it as a tool. It's a tool form of mathematics, a tool in which you use these processes to find missing information in a relationship of values. And we'll get into that, later. And these words themselves tend to scare folks, so we'll not even delve into that quite yet. And I always kind of draw this separation line here because I liken this to boot camp, Iraq, or boot camp and the war. Boot camp being arithmetic. Really, I always make sure I set a straightforward definition of arithmetic being the art of figuring. Figuring out amounts of things. And what I'm going to do with this, this was the introductory video. I wanted to welcome you all to the series. And video number 2, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about what arithmetic is, what it consists of, and we're going to, explore all of the facets of arithmetic, our mathematical boot camp, so that you are savvy enough with this weaponry to conquer the battle.